Hi, very warm welcome from me, Phil Parker, and from over there, Kate. Say hi, Kate.
Hi, everybody.
All the way, she's sitting in sunny Brighton at the moment, gazing at the sea, I'm guessing. Welcome to the Lightening Process London podcast. It's a pre-Christmas run. I'm doing a couple today. I'm doing it with Kate now and Jackie later on this morning. And we've just been discussing what we're going to talk about. And Kate has some two cunning ideas. So the first thing that we discussed talking about was how the lightning process, how we describe the lightning process. And it's taken a while to kind of find a succinct and simple way to describe it. But the way that I think is a good way to describe it is to imagine this is a brain, and there are certain areas of the brain that are very much interlinked. So certain states, certain bits of our brain that we trigger will massively be linked to other parts. So if we're used to being stressed, then quite often anger, frustration, upset will follow, and so the brain connects those two parts of the brain together so they can fire off on each other. And then on the other side of the brain, we've got the great states, the health-giving states of happiness, humour, excitement. But of course, the connection between this side and that side isn't that great, in that it's quite difficult to be stressed and happy at the same time. In fact, it's impossible. You can switch between one and the other, but it's quite difficult to have them both going on at the same time. And so a kind of good overview of what the lightning process is helping people to do is to move from crappy states, ones that don't help our health or our lives, into more powerful health-giving states. And by triggering that neurology, it will change the physiology. So that's a lot of what the lightning process is trying to do, to move from stuckness to what we call flourishing. So flourishing is a concept in positive psychology, the idea of not just being okay, but actually starting to really engage with life in a positive, health-giving, intrigued way. So stuck to flourishing. So as a roadmap, that's what the lightning process is planning to do. Anything you'd like to add to that, Kate?
No, I think that covers it.
That all makes sense. Okay, so stuck to flourishing, that's what we're looking at. So this is why with the lightning process people go, well, you know, what is the lightning process about? Is it about being positive? Is it about changing how much you exercise? And the answer is, it's about anything that moves you from stuck to flourishing. So sometimes in the lightning process, it's not about being positive. It's about recognizing that, you know, things are difficult in your life, acknowledging that in a way that allows you to move into flourishing. Often what can happen is people sit with something and don't deal with it. They can get really stuck with it. Equally, it can mean that if we're not exercising enough, not taking care of our diet, then that's stuck as well. We need to change that. So it's about anything that would move us from stuckness to flourishing, because the more we can do that, the more it changes our health. Research says, from Diner and Chan 2011, people who flourish, people who are happy, have an extra 10 years of longevity. 10 years, that's quite a lot. That's the same as the health risks of smoking. If you smoke, you lose about 10 years. So as I always say, never be a grumpy smoker. That's probably the worst of both worlds. But remember that happiness, flourishing, is actually scientifically linked to wellness, and in fact long-lived wellness. So then the question becomes, well, what could we do that would help us to move on that journey? So that's what we're going to talk about. So Kate, tell us a little bit about what you've been talking about with your clients around this whole idea of what will help you on this journey, this lightning process journey from stuckness to flourishing.
Yeah, so I've been talking to my clients about this lately, and one of the things that we've come up with is creating a flourish tool belt. So, you know, like workmen have those tool belts and they've got those pockets, so all their kind of the most important tools are at the front and they're really easily accessible. So we've been talking about a tool belt, although some people like to talk about it as an app. I quite like to touch things rather than swipe things. So you can create this belt in whichever way you want to. You can give it a colour, it can have a texture, it can be a different material, a certain width. Does it have any sparkles? Has it got a buckle? And decide what tools are the most important tools, the most effective tools at getting you from stuck to flourish in any given situation, and have them really, really accessible. So if people have learnt the lightning process, the structure, the strategy, the stepping out process, then that would definitely be one of them, and I suggest that's the most easily accessible one. But sometimes given the situation, it might be something different. So one of the tools could be music, for example. I was listening to the radio this morning and they were playing Christmas songs. One of them was Last Christmas, not a good tool for me. Reminds me of being a teenager and, you know, all the love lost and all that kind of stuff. But then they played Fairy Tale of New York, and that's a much better tool for me. So, I mean, you know, that sounds quite flippant, but music can be a great anchor for people and a great tool for people. I'm trying to think what other people have used. So
I've heard people use smells and aromas in the same way.
Smells and aromas,
or even
dance,
a memory of
yoga.
the smell. And in fact, they say that when you go into a coma, when you become unconscious, the last sense to be lost is the sense of smell. It's a really kind of primal. I mean, I've got my little puppy sitting by my feet. If you know about dogs and animals, smell is that one of their major, you know, sensations that they navigate the world through. Yeah. So what else apart from music, which is very
actually it's really interesting about smells, isn't it? So I know when my children were born, just kind of smelling them would release so many hormones, and real good happy hormones. And happy hormones are key, aren't they? Obviously, kind of to the flourish, and anything that helps to generate those is really great. So somebody, it was recently that I spoke to, it was dance. Another person, it was family, but real connection, you know, connection with real human beings, not just on social media for this person. So there's lots of different things that people can do. For somebody, it was a regular meditation practice. So it could be something that becomes a practice, or it could just be something that can happen really quickly. Lots of people have started to create their own playlists of music, print out photographs, so it becomes something visual. You know, visual is what helps you, and what helps you to go from stuck to flourish. But also, for some people as well, it can be about identifying how they want to live their next year. So I have recently done this exercise, and I decided that I would have 5 different new, some existing, but some really focusing on some new beliefs for the next year. And I wrote down 5 and then promptly forgot them because it was too many to remember. So, you know, keep it a manageable number. And I have got 3 now. And they are, if it's interesting to know, they are connection. And for me, that's about real human connection. And I've been doing that over the past year, and I want to carry on and build on that in the coming year. Sorry, Phil. Did I? Yeah. No, and fun. Again, I've had lots of fun, but I want to carry that through, and also nourish. To nourish myself and my family in a way that feels really healthy. Again, I'm doing some or a lot of that already, but I want to carry that on. And for me, it's really useful to have these 3 different ways of being, or 3 different beliefs, or 3 different parts of my identity, however I want to choose to describe it, that will help me to guide me through this next year. Something, almost an anchor, something to come back to reflect on at times, to make sure that actually I'm living the way that I want to, because I think it's really easy to get skew-whiffed, you know, to go on a different tangent depending on what happens, because sometimes stuff happens in life, doesn't it? So just to kind of bring myself back to this anchor. And I've started talking to my Lightening Process clients about this as well. So for some people, setting specific goals is really great. For me, I think just having a way of being is more useful.
Well, as you were saying, you know, a lot of goal setting happens on January the 1st, and by January the 5th, most of it has already gone. So we know that kind of goal setting, it can work for some people, but for most people it fails, and a lot of people every year they have exactly the same goals because they didn't manage to do them last time.
And I just think, why would you set yourself up for failure? Don't do it. You know, there's no point.
Instead, and this is a kind of concept that we're talking about more in the Lightening Process, so that many people now are familiar with the idea of mindfulness, you know, being present, which is great. The Lightening Process is similar to that, but slightly different. It says, instead of just being present, how about we be present in a very particular way, so that we actively look and experience something. So that in psychology they have these things called cognitive biases, where you will tend to have a preference for looking for certain things. So one of the examples is the negative bias, in that apparently, we were talking about this at our conference recently, that about a negative event will affect us 4 times as much as a positive event. And most of us can have that experience, because somebody goes, hey, you did a great job, that's really lovely to hear. But if somebody goes, you did a really crappy job on that seems to affect us much, much more than the positive accolade. And this idea is Berit was saying at the conference, she was saying a good way to understand this is negatives are like Velcro and positives affect you like your Teflon. Okay, it's much more difficult, it appears, to have positives coming on. So we have these filters, these biases, these ways of experiencing things. So some people will have a deeply negative bias and will be very pessimistic, and that will tend towards depression. Other people will be much more optimistic. So it's how are you bringing yourself to the present? And this is one of the things the Lightning Process is very big on, is not just being present to what is, but think, okay, what would be the most useful way? What would be the wisest way to be present to what's going on right now? And what you're talking about there are kind of great road maps. You know, so if you decide, right, for the next year, I'm going to choose as much of the time to focus on fun, to have fun, to notice the fun things, to notice the things that nourish me, to take myself from that place. And what was the third thing you had? Fun, nourish, and connection, and to make sure that I take time every day. Then it will start to happen, rather than just having kind of a dry goal that you wrote on a piece of paper and you forget the piece of paper.
Yeah. And I think as well, often when people set goals, it's the end destination. And there's this really brilliant video that I've posted in my recent blog on the Lightning Process website, by a philosopher called Alan Watts. He's a British philosopher, and he talks about the fact that people talk about things as if it's a destination, like life is a journey, and it's somewhere that they want to get to. And that's often what happens, of course, with New Year's resolutions. You know, I'm going to stop drinking in 3 months' time, or whatever it is. But actually, Alan Watts talks very beautifully, I think, about the fact, of course, it's not a journey. There isn't a destination. It is about being now. And by setting connection, fun, and nourish, I can do that now. It's not to end up being connected at the end of the year. It's to do that and be that now. And I just think that's a really amazing and powerful thing to do, rather than that end destination.
Well, one of the other things we were talking about at the conference was about and you mentioned this earlier, about the hormones, like when you have your babies for the first time, the production of oxytocin, very, very important neurotransmitter hormone, affects all sorts of things in the body. It used to be known primarily for what starts the process of giving birth, but now it's called the love hormone or the cuddle hormone, because it's triggered by a lot of things you talked about. It's triggered by connection to people, even on social media. It's triggered by sharing things, taking risks together, dancing together, and especially by laughter. That laughter is a really, really good thing. And we've talked about this a lot in the Lightning Process, how the importance of humour is often underrelated as being something flippant. It's not. It's really, really, really important. The more you can laugh, the more weller you will be, the more happy you will be, and the more your hormone systems will shift in a different way. So that's another thing that, like you said, with fun, or singing or dancing or listening to music, all these things trigger different responses, and laughter is one of the universal things that triggers a really, really positive effect in our body. So maybe if you listen to this, guys, you can be thinking, okay, well, Kate's got those three, what would I like to have? What would I like to have as a kind of main themes, instead of goals, themes to live my life from? And that would be a lot easier to do, and give you less that you need to kind of focus up on, and more just a general way of, oh, okay, well, how much fun did I have, and what could I do to make sure that I do? So have a think, and if you like to put a comment down at the bottom wherever you see this video or listen to this audio of what you've done, that would be really interesting to see what people think are the most important things. I mean, I would think, if I'm thinking about my next year, what would I put? I would definitely put fun. I think that's really important. I would put creativity. Being creative for me is something I really, really value. And what will be my third one? I shall think on what my third one is. So anything else before we close for this podcast, Kate?
No, just I feel your tool belt. I can see a pink sparkly stripy one. Nice thin one with a big gold buckle.
Have you been looking at my wardrobe again? I told you.
I just know. I know.
Well, have a great Christmas, Kate, if I don't see you before then. And to everyone watching the podcast, you take care now, and we'll see you in the new year. Cheers, Kate.
Bye.